I didn't know how to value myself outside of competition. So I had to walk away from everything I knew because I honestly, if I can be completely transparent, I was at such a low point in my life right there that I I knew that if I kept going down that route, that it was likely to lead me more towards a suicidal state of mind because I had already kind of had those thoughts. Because when you feel so worthless, you feel so devalued, and you've completely I tied your identification to the outcome, to the result, regardless of the effort. I mean, the effort was there, but the result was not. And that is a really difficult place to be in as an athlete and as a human being.
You're listening to the Born Primitive Podcast. Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to the Born Primitive Podcast. I'm here with my co-host, Big Tony. Tone, good morning.
Good morning, Bear.
And we are super excited for today's podcast. Joining us today is the former UFC Women's Bantamweight champion, also Strikeforce champion, and is currently making a comeback in the UFC, currently ranked 12th in the world, and fights in December. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Miesha Tate to the Born Primitive Podcast. Good morning, Miesha.
Hey, good morning, guys. How's it going?
Good. Tony and I were talking about kind of where to start, for this podcast, and we kind of want to fast forward a little bit and get right into it. And for me, I'm really curious. I understand that you were runner-up at the Ultimate Fighter, and then you got a chance to fight Ronda right after that, lost, then won 3 fights in a row, and that set you up to fight Holly for the championship. So
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah, I think you've got it.
there it is. So walk us kind of through that. Doing the Ultimate Fighter, getting runner-up, but then getting your shot against Ronda, and then losing, but then winning 3 in a row, and kind of just that ascension to get a seat at the table against Holly for the title. Just dive into all of that. We'd love to know more.
So I mean, that was just like such a time of getting through adversity, overcoming the obstacles, really feeling like beaten down and broken at times, and having to reinvent myself and pick myself up from the very bottom. Because as you know, failure isn't necessarily fun. I mean, I do think there is a lot of positives that come from failure if you have the right mindset, but it's not fun when you're in the throes of it. It sucks. And to amplify that, then when you add like fans and people who aren't your family or your friends, who aren't giving you constructive feedback necessarily, that they're on there on social media, and it's like you've got to learn to interpret these things and try to tune out what you can and pretend like it doesn't matter what everyone thinks, but you still hear all the chatter. You add that platform on top of failure, so it's not just like you fail and only the people really close to you know about it. It feels like the whole world knows about it when you're on a platform like that. So I just remember thinking, like, after I lost to Ronda, like, that was the end of the world for me. Like, it just was, there was nothing that was going to fix it except getting back in there and fighting again, trying to continue to climb my way to the top. And I just happened to be a pretty stubborn person. So that is what I did. And, when the opportunity arises, I really like to just jump in both feet. I don't usually take a lot of time to think about it because I know that if I put myself in the position and I'm setting myself up, that I'm ready for any opportunity. And that's what ended up happening, is I ended up, getting that opportunity against Ronda, and then obviously to coach on the Ultimate Fighter, right? And then I lost, and then I had to put those string of wins together, which wasn't easy, fighting all the top girls or top contenders. And not being the champ, still having to fight those caliber of women just to get an opportunity to fight Holly Holm at the end. But it paid off, I think the stubbornness and the perseverance paid off.
And when you were that close to winning a belt and you were defeated, and then you had to kind of go back to the drawing board and kind of restart that climb, did you have different perspective the second time because you got to almost get a taste of what it might be, but you were that close? And I guess psychologically, when you went back to training, did it seem like this insurmountable task, or were you that much more hungry because you were like, all right, I got a glimpse and I know I can win?
Yeah, I would say that there were periods of both. I think that the polarity of having that something so close and then ripped away from you, you have these polarizing feelings at times where you're like, I was so close, I can do it again. And then in the next moment, you feel like you'll never get there. And the road is longer than it's ever been. Because when you lose a title shot, it's like you go to the back of the bus. You know what I mean? It's not like it's close anymore. It's like that was the opportunity and you missed it, and it may never come again. I mean, an opportunity to fight for a world title sometimes is it's a one shot deal. So it's both. It's like I want that more than anything ever. I want to get back there and I will do whatever it takes. But then you get self-defeating sometimes, and it's this cycle of like, I've got to get there. Oh my God, but how? Now the road is so long, everyone's in front of me again. How am I going to possibly ever make that happen? And it goes to setting the small goals. I'm just going to go to practice today. And then tomorrow, you know what? I'm going to ask for a fight. I'm going to get that lined up, and I'm just going to keep chipping away at this tree until I knock it down again. But it's the most frustrating feeling to be that close and then all the way back, to square zero is what it feels like.
I think what's unique about combat sports is like you guys can't fight that often, right? So you have this huge period where you have to wait. I mean, I think fighting probably 3 times in a year would be a busy year, right? Maybe it's like you might have to wait 6 months. And I'm comparing it to other sports. I was a football guy. It's like if you had a bad game, you went in on Sunday, you watched tape, you got chewed out on tape with your buddies and you all watched it. And then you got back, Monday morning, you're practicing again, you're prepping for the next appointment or next opponent that Saturday. Right. So it was short-term memory and you knew you could redeem yourself immediately, where you guys, not only did you slide down in the rankings, but now you have to wait 4 or 5 months before you can even get back to getting some traction again in the right direction. And that has to be such a difficult thing to overcome, particularly the style of training you all do day in and day out in the gym is a grind. Getting punched in the face is not enjoyable. You know what I mean? You get dinged and you get injured and everything that comes with that. And there's such a wait period until your next, chance so it's thinking and framing it up like that. It's like, man, you really got to have the right mentality and a lot of mental toughness to be able to go through that.
You couldn't be more spot on with that, Bear. And that's something that I've thought about too when you're in an individual sport, and especially one like fighting, is that when you have a loss, you oftentimes have to sit on that. And it's like you're choking on it for months until you get an opportunity at redemption. And I remember at that stage in my life, I was very much identifying my value with my outcome. So if I won, I was a winner. And if I lost, I was a loser. And if you lose with an injury or a suspension, you may be out for 6 months. You may be out for longer. So you're sitting on that feeling of I am a loser for such an extended period of time that I think it can really put you in a state of mental dismantle where you just start to get so upset with yourself or you want to do more. And this is sometimes where athletes come back too soon. They want to be in the gym. And I was just talking to a buddy of mine who I haven't seen almost probably 9 months because he had surgery on his knee, ACL repair. And I said, hey, so are you cleared to train? And he said, no, I'm not actually cleared to train for another few months, but I couldn't stand it anymore. I couldn't stand it. So I'm in the gym and I was like, well, just try to listen to yourself. And he's like, we never listen to ourselves. It's like the mother bear in me wants to be like, hey, but you have to listen. Like, I get that you want to move your body and athletes tend to heal quicker. And we just have a different kind of way of thinking of how we want to approach and tackle situations. But there's a prime example of somebody who is kind of sulking at home months on end after a loss, after a surgery, who's just kind of going stir crazy. And I don't think that's an uncommon thing for athletes to experience. And in our sport, the unfortunate part is we don't get to compete very often. I mean, if you were competing every other month, that would be pretty outstanding. And there are a few fighters on the roster, maybe like Cowboy Cerrone, who has now retired, and Kevin Holland. And there's a few guys who are kind of afforded that opportunity. They've kind of made their reputation off of like fighting all the time, and they'll take the short notice fights, and they'll take the risks, and they win some, they lose some. But they're loved for the fans for that reason, and the UFC kind of grants that. But not everybody gets that opportunity. I know fighters that are begging for fights all the time, and they're lucky if they get a fight every 3 months. You know, it's kind of like a 3 to 6 month average turnaround. So 3 fights a year is like you're doing good. That's like 100 out of 100. Like you're getting the fights. You know, that's max. Usually we don't get more than that.
So, Miesha, did you find yourself riding a bit of a roller coaster in those years, as far as when things were good and you were winning, you were on a high, but then when you were losing, things got low? Was that not only, I know you said your mental state was that way, but did you see even your habits outside of fighting? Did you see it having negative or positive effects on those kind of lateral things as well, depending on how you were performing in the ring?
Yeah, I think that you're setting it up perfectly, because that is exactly what it was like when I was in that lost state and I was a loser in my mind. It carried over into everything, and it was really kind of a sickening mentality to have. And I am still to this day trying to distinguish whether that is a necessary thing for athletes to be the best in the world or whether it's not, because it's certainly a terrible skill set to have for life. It is performance enhancing as far as like you will isolate to one tiny thing that you do well, and you're hyper focused, and it's fighting and nothing else matters. That means I will miss funerals, I will miss Christmas, I will miss weddings, I will miss family outings. Like I will miss everything that makes life worth living to obtain and acquire the best result that I can get in this, because that is who I am now. The rest of this is just outside noise. Problem is that being an athlete is a relatively short-lived career. So having that mindset doesn't set us up for success later when it comes to valuing other things in our life, because we don't. We only value the one thing in our life, and we have to be hyper focused on that. And I find this is really common. I don't know if you guys have ever seen the documentary film The Weight of Gold, but if you haven't watched it, I would recommend it. It talks about a lot of Olympians and very high level athletes, mostly Olympians actually, and the sickening mindset. Imagine only getting to really compete every 4 years. Oh my God, I think
It's crazy.
that would be
crazy.
I mean, I can't. And if you're silver or bronze, even, it's just like, you don't even matter. It's just about the gold medalists. Like, how crazy is that, right? So I guess when you're saying like, did it affect the other parts of my life? Yes, absolutely. Because I didn't know how to live for anything else than that at that time. And it's a sick obsession. And as I mentioned, I'm still trying to distinguish whether that is a necessary evil or if that is just the less ideal way to do it and still get it done. It's kind of like, maybe think about like breaking a horse, that there are some people who go out and they'll break the horse, and they'll get the horse to obey through just breaking their spirit. But then there's other people who will form a relationship with the horse and get the horse to actually trust them, and then they have a bond. Now, you may get faster results with breaking the horse because the horse is going to realize, like, I have no other way out but to listen. But the moment they get a chance to stomp your ass, they probably will. You know what I mean? Like, so it's like this fight that's going on there, that the horse is listening because it doesn't have a choice. And I feel like sometimes we put that pressure on ourselves as athletes. Like, we don't give ourselves a choice to be human or to feel anything else or experience anything else. And whereas I think there's a healthier way, but I don't know if I've seen it done yet. I think there's a way where we can kind of balance our mental and listen to ourselves and be more in tune as humans and be happier about the journey, as opposed to just being hyper focused about the journey. But I don't know if that's true or not. To be honest, I don't know. I hope that it's true. And that's what I'm kind of here right now at that point in my life, trying to see if I can make that connection, because I certainly now value so much more than just fighting. And so it's an interesting place to be at.
That's a fascinating topic to dive into, because we've talked about this already on the podcast, is the idea that by having a relentless pursuit towards something, it can create collateral damage in other aspects of your life. And it sounds like maybe you experience that as well. And it's not like it's malicious. It's just you're competitive, you're type A, and you're striving towards a goal, and you're obsessed. And you're kind of posing the question, like, is that the right approach? And I don't know the right answer either, but my intuition is that for a specific period of time, you might have to have that mentality to be the best. And there's no other way around it. But as long as you identify, and it's very calculated, okay, for the next 5 years, this is my window to be a champion, to make money for my family, to get endorsement deals, et cetera, I have to cut out all the noise and maybe sacrifice some balance in my life, because the ends will justify the means. So, maybe you're not going to those weddings and the bachelorette parties and all that, because, hey, you got to be in bed by 9 because you got to be recovered so you can train hard the next day because you want to be a champion. And you do that for a specific amount of time. And I think anyone at the highest level, there are some exceptions. I think people that are just naturally crazy talented can get away with giving like an 80% effort and still being elite. But to get to that 0.1%, unless you're one of those crazy,
those people.
Unless you're one of those outliers, you have to be obsessed. And it's unavoidable that there's going to be things that you have to sacrifice. But to your point, it's like at some point you got to be able to reel that in, because that can't just become how you're programmed, in perpetuity. Like you have to at least have self-awareness of, okay, when that time has come and gone, I have to be able to reprogram to realize there's more to life than just being a champion in the UFC or being the best golfer in the world, or, whatever it is you're chasing.
Yes.
Well,
I'm 100% with you on that. I think the problem, though, is that nobody has this conversation with athletes. We just all expect that they're going to know and figure it out, and oftentimes they don't. And I think that's why, it's a big part of the reason why mental health has taken a prominent stance in athletics. I think Simone Biles is a great example of somebody who's just hyper focused, the best in the world, but she's taken a break and she's focused on her mental health, and she's come back and she's doing really well. So I think that there is definitely sacrifice without question. Yes, the bachelorette parties, the going to bed on time because sleep is important for recovery. Those things are kind of, missing those things are kind of accepted. But I also think that there's like an internal dialogue that I think we could work on with athletes that could be healthier. I think that sometimes intuition isn't listened to, and that is part of being connected with ourselves as humans, is how our internal voice and like our internal dialogue is going. Because if we are saying, hey, I'm cool with missing the holidays, like I'm cool with that, like I understand that, and I think you do need that to be hyper focused. However, like if you have an injury and you're just so rock-headed, like so headstrong that you won't listen to your body and you overtrain, or we see that all the time when fighters gas out in fights. 99% of the time it's not because they undertrained, it's because they overtrained. Like they didn't know how to reel it back in and take rest days. They didn't know. They're so obsessed with like, if I'm not in the gym, I'm not doing enough. And they don't ever stop to focus on the recovery. Like you don't actually get stronger when you're in the gym. You get weaker when you're in the gym because you're tearing down your body. The whole point of that is for stress adaptation to happen. And then you get stronger for getting weaker. But some people miss that. And I think it's this vicious cycle that athletes go through that nobody's really taking time to talk about. And I wish that it would be talked about a little bit more, like, hey, like, let's talk about your mental health a little bit. Cause you're willing to make sacrifice, but like, how are you doing? Like, how are you treating yourself? And are you going to be all right when you have to leave this sport? Because it's a pretty short career. Like being an athlete is not something you typically see people doing in their 40s. I think that's why people are so impressed with Tom Brady. I mean, what an incredible, iconic man to be able to do what he does at his age. And you've seen a couple fighters. I mean, there's like Randy Couture, Glover Teixeira, these guys doing well in MMA up into their 40s. And I think part of that is because MMA is such a strategic sport. I mean, I think there's like a little difference in that, is that you don't necessarily have to be like the fastest or the strongest. Sometimes you just have to be the smartest. And I think our sport affords more room for that area to carry a bigger margin, because sometimes you get these young, spry people in the gym that are just, they're all over the place and they're hard to get a hold of. And you're like, okay, I'm going to set them up for this because I can already tell they're going to roll right into this guillotine because they're just cannot stand to be on bottom. So I'm just going to, I'm going to get this one thing and I'm going to set them up and bam, like they put themselves there because you knew the route and they didn't. Right. And that's what comes with the experience of being an experienced MMA fighter. And these are the things that I feel like I find myself capitalizing on, because I have put thousands and thousands of hours in the gym that just cannot be recreated any other way. So that's the beautiful part of my sport, is I think that the longevity and the smarts combine together and kind of allow athletes to potentially be in this game longer if you can be smarter and listen to your body a little bit and focus on recovery and have some good internal dialogue, I think.
Well, to me, Miesha, it sounds almost like this second half of your career, where you're at now, is more of an expression of your art, whereas before it may have been more an expression of your ego. And we all, as a high level athlete myself, bear as well. It's like the difference between those two, although seeming subtle on the surface, is so deep in the sense that like you can still be very, if you're expressing your art, you can still be very disciplined, you can be dialed, you can be committed, but you're not attached to the result. Whereas when you're doing it for your ego, the only thing you give a shit about is what others are perceiving as of you, and then also the result. So that works well when things are going well, but then as soon as one of those cards gets pulled out, that scaffolding falls down and you're left looking at it like, oh shit, I don't even know who I am. So there it's like, and that's to me what bubbled up is like, not only you, it feels like you're kind of in that place, but to me is the line between obsession and discipline. It's like you can still be obsessed, but if you're expressing an art out of like, hey, this is just what I enjoy doing, this is who I am, that's a lot different than identifying completely with it. And then that has a shelf life. And as soon as that shelf life's up, you're going to end up in a tricky position. And I know I've been through it. You've been through it as an athlete. And it sounds like you kind of went through that as well.
Oh yeah. I mean, the reason that I retired was for that exact reason. I had won UFC gold. I had beat Holly Holm in the 5th round after a tenacious war, and I got the choke, and it was such an amazing moment. And then I fought Amanda Nunes, who we didn't, she went on a run starting with me that just was
insane.
It was phenomenal. I mean, she is incredible. She retired a 2-division champ. That's so cool. Like nobody has ever done that before. So she's a badass woman. And when I lost the belt, and then I tried to I knew the only way to feel better was to get back in there and fight again, because I again had developed no other skill than if you win, you're a winner, and if you lose, you're a loser. That is not a good way to think about life or a sport or yourself in general. So I came to find out anyways. And then I lost the fight after that because I was just depleted. I was exhausted in the other parts of my life. And I think I was burning the candle at both ends and the middle. And I just didn't have anything left. And so again, then I lost on top of a loss, which just compounded the depression of feeling like I wasn't valuable to myself. I didn't know how to value myself outside of competition. So I had to walk away from everything I knew, because I honestly, if I can be completely transparent, I was at such a low point in my life right there that I knew that if I kept going down that route, that it was likely to lead me more towards a suicidal state of mind, because I had already kind of had those thoughts. Because when you feel so worthless, you feel so devalued, and you've completely tied your identification to the outcome, to the result, regardless of the effort. I mean, the effort was there, but the result was not. And that is a really difficult place to be in as an athlete and as a human being. And I felt like I had depleted my value and depleted my worth, and that I didn't have anything left to give. And therefore I wasn't worth I wasn't worth anything. I maybe wasn't worth living. So these were thoughts that I was battling, and I knew fortunately I had enough strength and sense, and I kind of pulled the last little bit that I had together to say, you have to make a drastic change, and you need to figure out who the hell you are. What, like, what decisions would you make if fighting were not a part of your life anymore? Like, how can you identify outside of that? And so I packed up my car and my little chihuahua, and I just hit the road for 2 weeks, and I made all these very weird and random decisions. I literally slept on the beach. I would stop at random places, go to random like fairs or whatever was going on in the little town that I was passing through, a little mom and pop restaurant, or stop and go wine tasting, like all by myself, just like a crazy person. I just did all
I think
this.
it's awesome.
Yeah.
I don't think it's crazy. It sounds like a blast.
People are like, you're doing what by yourself? Yes.
Former
I'm
UFC
eating lunch
champ
by
just going to
myself.
the county fair, eating a elephant ear
You know,
by herself.
yeah. I was so into it, and what I realized was it was a self searching, trying to identify myself with the things that I loved and cared about other than fighting. And so I actually reconnected with a lot of friends and family that I either hadn't previously even connected with, or that I hadn't seen in a long time. And I made that a point of that trip as I went from Las Vegas, Nevada, up the coast of California to Washington, where I'm from. When I was in Washington, I was already setting up, hey, I'm going to go see my great aunt. I'm going to go have dinner with my great great uncle. Like, like I'm going to do these things that might give me, they're kind of calling me, like, I guess in this moment of being alone and isolated and not having a lot, it's like, what do I think I need right now? And I was like, I think I need people. I think I need people that matter. I think I need family. I think I need friends. I think I need to invest some of my time in those people that are going to be able to give me back my sense of self. And so that was a big part of it too, was human connection, reconnecting with people that were, yeah, that were family, family and friends.
And were you able to keep that momentum going as far as, okay, you make the decision to retire, and you're doing some self-exploration. Did you keep that momentum going in a positive direction where you truly were kind of exploring things you hadn't taken the time to do prior? Or did you kind of hit a point where, yeah, that lasted good for 2 weeks, but then you find yourself, oh shit, now I'm retired and I'm having to deal with this darkness and try to navigate what my next step is? As in, like, yeah, did it? Because I find that, at least in my personal journey, those low points, they usually, it takes some time, man. It takes some time to sit in it and kind of take small steps to kind of work your way out. Or were you able to be one of those people that made a 180 and kind of, hey, I'm interested in these things now. I can kind of set that to the side and get on with kind of my new pursuits?
So I was really scared. I was super afraid of what life would look like without competing. I was scared to death to take that leap of faith because it was all I knew. And just to kind of throw in there too, that I had exited a toxic relationship of about 9 years, who was intertwined in MMA, who was actually coaching me at the time. And so I kind of had to break off from all of it. So I'm really feeling like I'm on shaky ground, that I'm on thin ice, and I just don't know what to expect. I'm kind of very much in a fight or flight. I don't know who I am, and I'm not comfortable with myself. So I'm trying to be kind and patient with myself, and just let myself explore my life, my family, my friends. Like, what would I do with, what decision would I make without interpreting anyone else's opinion of what I should do or be or wear or anything. And I feel like my problem was that I had hung on too long in that situation before I let go. So I had already kind of started to realize and gone through a lot of that negative cycle while I was still in it. And it was kind of just like this spiral down. And I think once I hit rock bottom, that was the worst moment. And it was an important moment that I either chose to change everything, or that I don't think there was much further down I could go besides suicide. And so when I let go of all of it, and I'm talking all of it, I'm talking, I left my house, I left everything but my car and my dog, and I just left. Now, I don't know, maybe not everybody has an opportunity to completely walk away from the life that they have created. But in that moment, I was fortunate enough to do that. And that's exactly what I did. And so for me, it wasn't that I didn't have any like kind of downs, but they were so minimal. Like once I picked that I was going to make big change, I went all in, just like I did when I went with the sport, right? And I made massive change and growth. I put myself in a completely different atmosphere. And so I feel like for me, I was getting a lot of the law of diminishing return at that point, of spiritually, emotionally, mentally, getting so much fulfillment that I was starved from being in the sport and the relationship. And so for me, I feel like that was mostly a very positive experience, minus the fact that I was scared to death. I didn't know what I was going to find, and I didn't know if I was going to like who I was. But for me, the positive far outweighed any of the negative, and I had already been at such a low point that for me it was mostly positive. Yeah, it was mostly positive.
Yes, that's fascinating because we actually just released an episode, the time of we're recording this right now, called "Burn the Boats," and it was in regards to that exact thing of going all in on something and kind of forgetting the old way and just saying this is the only endeavor right now, and you're not going to look back over your shoulder. So that's super cool and ironic that that same theme just came up. And another theme I think to extract from this, just kind of hearing you two talk, is like people need to make sure they're developing other aspects of their life, even if they're hyper focused on something, because as soon as that goes away, you're going to be left out in the cold, right? And an example from my standpoint, I had a really cool opportunity to attend an event. It's a charity event called Stronghold, out at a remote ranch in Utah. Guy named Mike Saparis has a really cool ranch up there, and Donnie Edwards from the charity Best Fence Foundation runs the Stronghold thing. What it does is it takes former special operations veterans and pairs them up with NFL guys. And we all go up to this ranch and we hang out for 4 or 5 days, and we talk with mental health professionals, and we sit around the campfire and drink beers and whiskey and smoke cigars and just talk about our experiences. And what we realized is, ironically, and this is the whole point of the program, there's a huge similarity between guys that are leaving the special operations community in the military and these NFL guys that were held on this pedestal that are now not in the NFL anymore. And it was this transition of, while the NFL guys are, of course, much more public, those guys are going out to dinner now and people aren't recognizing them anymore, and they're not comping their meals, and like all these little things that when they were playing and you're in that city and you got the fan base, you're the man. And then in the special operations community, while it's not as public, you have this sense of confidence in this almost validation that, and maybe you guys won't admit this, but it's true. When you're in that environment, you are seen as a dangerous man by other men, and that is something that is very fulfilling as a grown man, to be seen as dangerous. And when you hang that rifle up and you're not in that game anymore, it's an adjustment, right? And you're not around those guys anymore. That's another one. You're not in the locker room for the football guys, or for us, on the road training with these guys and having stressful and awesome experiences together. So it was this cool thing where we realized, wow, while these are two totally different occupations, the similarities are incredibly overlapping. And I would imagine, in any professional sport or in any kind of elite endeavor, that kind of transition occurs. But if you were someone that was watering the other aspects of your life during that time, that transition isn't as hard, right? Because you can immediately pivot and embrace those other things. But some of the guys from our community, I mean, they were all in on the job and nothing else mattered, to the detriment of marriages and things like that, even as the fathers and stuff. And then 20 years ago, they retire, and that's gone. Crazy difficulties transitioning. So hopefully that's a lesson for all of us. Make sure we're focusing on other aspects of our life, because eventually the gig is going to be up. And you kind of experienced that. And I love the way you said rock bottom, but then you immediately embraced the new reality. And you were able to climb out of it, and that's really cool.
Well, it's like that family and friends, I think, should be that locker room for you. Do you know what I mean? Like that you should build a group of close friends that not only are there to support you, but also call you out on your bullshit, so that you literally cannot find yourself in a toxic environment, because of how much they hold you responsible. And what I mean by that is like, if you have shitty friends and like you could end up in a really bad relationship 6 months in and your friends won't call you out on it. So they're kind of just like, yeah, he's dating a crazy girl. Whereas when you have a really strong like friends and family group, those things, they're like your guardians. And like that should be your fallback option, not your buddies at work. Do you know what I mean? Because that has a shelf life. And like if you get too leveraged into that, as you said, when you have to pull back and you have to retire, it's like, yeah, now your family that you neglected for 20 years that should be your support system resents you because you spent all your time with your boys your whole 20 years in. So yeah, that's
Yeah. And I was really fortunate to be well received by a family that I hadn't made an effort to really be with, or that I had even intentionally kind of shut out. You know, my mom and I went through a very difficult time with a lot of turmoil, and where we weren't really speaking for a few years, and then part of that was the strain of the relationship. She didn't think that it was good for me, but of course we all grow up and we do things maybe that our parents, it's not their favorite thing. And that was a situation where she was still trying to be a mama bear, but realized like, mom, I'm in my 20s, like you cannot boss me around like I was when I was 5 or 6 or 7, well meaning or not. Like it's just not going to go well, because when you come at me with resistance, like I'm going to come at you with resistance, and ultimately like, now this is my life and my decision, so if you don't agree with it, please step aside. And that's kind of what happened. And it was so unfortunate, because then my mom and I have a great relationship again now, as well as with my dad. But at the time, I think as we grow and we go from children to adolescents to adults, we have to instinctively separate ourselves a little bit, and we want to find a partner and connect and create our own family. So it is only natural that we kind of do that. And when our parents give us a ton of pushback, or they don't like who we're dating, it's not conducive on either side. It's just basically going to lead to probably lead to separation of parents, not separation of the couple. If anything, it probably puts the couple even stronger together, because now at least for me, I felt isolated a little bit, right? Like now I didn't really have my mom and my dad anymore. So it was like the only thing I had was kind of this. So I think it probably actually kept me in the relationship longer. Whereas if I could have comfortably come and talked to my mom about it, that would have been different. So I do think that there is a healthy approach too for family to remember that, you can't be too like pushy about what you think. Just remember that sometimes all we need to hear, like all people need to hear, is like, hey, I am here for you if you need me. Like we may not agree on everything, but I am here for you. If you need me, I'm always here for you. And I think that's the best stance to take, because I know myself, at least as an athlete, maybe not every other person, but an athlete, but in particular, we are so hard headed. And that's part of what makes us great, is that we will and will not listen to anything that we feel like is going to take away from what it is that is important to us in that moment. Like we are just hyper focused on it. And so for me anyways, it's like the harder she pushed, the more I resisted. And that was just me in life. The harder anything pushed me in life, the stronger I was going to be for it, the more I was going to resist, the more I was going to rise above. And so I really feel like I was forged in adversity. It was the adversity that made me stronger. And I always love this analogy or study, if you will, that there were these scientists, and this actually happened, scientists, and for whatever reason, they were growing trees, and they had it all right. They're like, we have it all right. We've got the light, we've got the soil perfect, we've got the pH balanced, we've got the fertilizer. Like, I mean, and these trees were growing beautifully, perfect, until they reached a certain height, and then they just fell over, like literally just like limp. They fell over. And the scientists failed to recognize that one thing that they didn't account for was wind. It's the wind that actually gives the trees the strength to stand. And if you remove the wind, the resistance, the trees are not able to stand strong, because they never develop the strength. And for me, it was all about getting through those times of adversity and pushback, right? So you push into me, I'm going to push back in everything that I did. And when I drove into the sport, I was like, the sport is pushing back on me, and I'm going to push through. I'm going to stand stronger for that. Unfortunately, the same thing kind of happened with my parents and my family, because I felt like they were pushing, and I was like, no, I already know how to play this game. I'll just push harder. and it led to a relationship failing for many years. We just didn't really talk. We didn't communicate. And I wish that I had somebody that wasn't saying, you need to get out of that relationship, because I wouldn't have it. I wouldn't hear it. I didn't believe that. I wasn't in that mindset. I thought that this relationship was good for me. So, or at least I wasn't ready to hear those things yet. I just wasn't ready. And so I think maybe if I had a comfortable place to go and say, you know what, I am kind of upset about this, or I am not feeling so good about this. Maybe I could have had somebody to just like hear me, and then I could have heard my own self. And I might have decided at that point that I was actually the one deciding that I didn't want to be in this relationship, as opposed to the more people telling me to get out of it. It was like, no, then it was almost like I had to fight for it, right? It was like a reverse psychology that I wasn't aware of at the time. I just know it now. And now that I'm a parent and I have a 3 and a 5-year-old, I realize how important it is to make my children feel like I'm on the same team. So it's like, put your shoes on. I don't want to. I'm tired. My legs are tired. Like, okay, well, I could be like, no, go put your shoes on now. Like, I've now become the enemy, as opposed to, all right, well, if you're feeling a little bit tired, how about I hold your hand and we'll go together? Or how about I'll go get your shoes and you're going to put them on, like a team effort. So anyways, this is, as I grow into this, I realize like how important that is for our human psychology, to feel like the people that we love and care about, and vice versa, that we're there for them, whether we necessarily agree with what they're saying or feeling at any time. It's like, we're on their team.
100%. I think the tree analogy one, and I knew coming into this that you were a parent. Bear and I are new parents as well. It's like, that's a conundrum I think you find yourself in as parents. Is you literally just said adversity is what shaped me. I feel the same. I grew up in a very interesting dynamic as a hillbilly in Southwest Pennsylvania, and I look back on it and laugh. But I'm like, the adversity as a child and stuff, like I wouldn't trade that for anything. And just the kind of weirdness that we grew up in. But as a parent now, it's interesting because you want to provide for them. You obviously want to be as loving as possible, but it's always like, where is that line of giving them too much and too much support, and then also allowing them to have their own journey, expose themselves to that adversity that's been such a big part of yourself, as you just mentioned, myself, I know Bear as well. It's an interesting, I think we may have talked about that on one of the earlier podcasts, is like, where is that line, and how do you make sure, I think it relates to what you just said. You have a unconditional support for them, but you also don't put your fangs in them, and you allow them to go explore, and they're gonna naturally mess up. They're gonna make mistakes, and as long as you're there unconditionally to support them, and not in an enabling way, but just be there as a kind of safety mat for them. I think for me, that's kind of where I rationalize. It's like, yeah, don't, like, no judgment, like be there as support, but then also be willing to cut the ties when they're ready and let them go explore, let them go make their mistakes, but have you to fall back on in a way that you're still real with them. Yeah, you're still real, but you're not enabling.
Yeah, you already got it figured out. Good job for being a good parent.
I'm sure I'll mess it up,
great.
but
I love
yeah,
what you're saying.
yeah,
One of my biggest things as a parent, and when you say about that fine line, is allowing my children to do dangerous things safely.
yeah.
What do you mean by that?
Right.
Maybe I
So
could use some advice there.
Right. Okay. So I have a 3 and a 5-year-old, and when we go to the playground, there are things that they're going to try to do that make me a little uncomfortable, because I know the consequence. If they fall from that height, they're probably going to cry pretty hard. Like, it's going to hurt. But are they going to die? And are they going to break something? If they're not, I'm going to let them take the risk. Right? I'm going to let them, but I'm going to walk them. I'm going to say, hey, make sure you hold on here. Do you have steady footing? All right. Let's try. Go ahead. Like, or maybe I won't even say anything, and I'll just let them try to figure it out. And they might fall and they might cry, and they might get hurt. And that's life, right? Because I'm not going to rob them of their natural courage. I'm not going to make them soft in that exchange. I'm going to let them fall. I'm going to let them experience those things, but I will be there for them, and I will obviously mitigate risk. I'm not going to let my child climb on top of a 2-story house and think that it's a good idea to jump. But yeah, if they're swinging from monkey bars, or if they're hanging, upside down with a foot, like, I'm gonna try to make them aware of making good decisions. Like, hey, what do you think it would be like if you fell from right there? Get them to think for themselves. What would happen if I fell from right here? Is this a risk that I want to take or not? And then I let them make the choice. And for me, that's kind of like, that balance of like, I have to let my children take risks. I cannot put them in a bubble. I cannot steal their opportunity to think for themselves. I cannot rob them of the natural courage that they have. But I'm always on their team. And when it comes to emotional support, the world is mean enough. I don't have to be the bad guy. Like, I want to always be the person that my kids know that they can come and talk to. When somebody was mean to them at school, when their teacher wasn't having a good day, when when they're confiding in me, when they're telling me, like, I always want them to feel like I am on their team. I am here for you no matter what. And that still means like you're going to have requirements and things that you're going to have to do. Yes, I'm saying you're going to do your homework. You're going to have a meltdown about that. That's fine. I'll be here for you. Have your meltdown. I don't fear that one bit. I am not scared of my children having a meltdown. Why? Because I have meltdowns. And I think it's part of being a human. I got so, are we allowed to cuss on this?
Yeah. Yeah, we're all
Right.
about
Let
it.
it rip.
We're all about it.
I got so fucking pissed the other day because there was construction every which way outside my house. And for whatever reason, this particular day just pissed me off. I could not go any which way on my regular route without having to go around the construction. And I was just pissed. And I'm like, I think I have a right to just be mad right now. Is that okay? I'm like, I look at my kids the same way. It's like they're going to have emotions, except their brains are not even developed enough to stop them from having the outburst. But think about it for a second. It's important to know how our kids feel, right? Because when we stop knowing how people feel because they keep it a secret, that's how we get surprised by suicide, right? That's how we're like, whoa, we didn't see that one coming. Well, because they're not talking to anybody about it. Our kids don't have the ability to do that because their brains aren't developed. So they freak out. That's cool. Freak out. All right, you want to hug? You want to talk about it? You good now? All right, now you're going to do your homework, which is what you were originally upset about. Still going to draw the line. Like, you're not getting out of it, but I'm still here for you if you're having a hard day. Sorry about that, because they might be having a hard day because somebody was mean to them at school and they don't know how to talk about it. They don't know why they're feeling the way they are, but they have a right to feel their feelings just like we do. So anyways, that's how I try to do it. It's mostly gentle parenting, but I don't want to make them soft either. I want them to do sports and I want them to excel. But I hope that when you talked about that a second ago, that you wouldn't change that, what you went through in the adversity, and that it made you stronger. I am so with you in that. Like, I know that made me stronger too. However, it gives us a lot more baggage to deal with at the end of the day. When we can see the positive, doesn't mean that it couldn't have maybe been better than that. Because like, what if you had all that and you didn't have to go through the depression or the baggage or the emotional processing or all the things that we have to kind of unpack once we have boxes to open? Like, we've compartmentalized all these things, right? And I was an expert at this. Like, that was my jam. I was a compartmentalizing master. And I think it's the only reason that I got to be a world champion was because I had so much bullshit going on in my life. And I was like, I'm just going to put it all in this box and I'm going to close it and I'm going to ignore it. But it never goes away. Like, the day that I retired, it's like the box was like, right? And everything comes jumping out of that box and you're like, oh my God, I wasn't really ready for that. But it doesn't leave. It doesn't ever go anywhere until we unpack it and we move through it. So I think there's pros and cons. I think we can certainly see positive and appreciate our strength for the adversity. But I guess my goal is to do better for my children than what my parents knew how to do, and not blaming them whatsoever. Because I mean, the generations of, everything, the trauma and all these things that are passed down. My parents loved me and they did the best that they could.
Well,
but I'm going to do better for my kids.
And what you're doing mitigates exactly what it feels like you felt like you couldn't do when you were in that relationship and your parents are saying, hey, you need to get out of it. And what I mean by that is, I think if you build a strong relationship, and it sounds like that's exactly what you're doing, where your kids feel comfortable with you, or this could be a friend or a loved one, then in that moment where they have to tell you something hard, if you've built that relationship year over year over year over year, when they sit down across from you and say, Miesha, I love you, and I think you're in a toxic relationship, you're not going to throw your fangs out because you're like, this is somebody I trust intimately. Whereas the norm, and I know I felt this at times with my parents too, is like, the norm is that you build this weird relationship over the years of like, they respond with anger to everything. So as you said in the more extreme answer or example of suicide, you just shut down to that person. You don't feel like you can open up to them. So you kind of wear a mask anytime you're around them, so that then when they sit down and tell you that, it's like, hey, motherfucker, you didn't know me for the last 20 years and now you're going to tell me I'm in a shitty relationship? Like, fuck you. Like, and that's
Yes.
that's like the difference.
Yes.
And that relates even to us here as leader. Like that's two different leadership styles, as I call like the dictator versus like a leader out of respect. And like the response you get from people when they truly respect and love you compared to a
Yes.
dictator who's just telling people what to do, it's two completely different responses. And that, I think it relates, it sounds like you're doing, and that's like a beautiful part of people's journey, if they're willing to look at it, is you're doing that in a way that if you need to sit down with your daughter or son when they're 20 and have a hard conversation, you've put in the time to build that relationship so that they don't put their fangs out to you, because you've been an unwavering support for them from the beginning.
Yes. Number one priority is my children know that I am on their team. Like, I'm 100% down. I am on your team. And if you are having a hard day, I'm having a hard day. Like, we're in it together. Like, even if I'm asking you to do hard things, even if my expectations are high, even if I require you to meet those expectations, yes, you're going to do your homework. Yes, you're going to clean your room. Yes, you're going to do this, and the expectations are going to continue to grow as I want my children to be responsible, successful adults. However, I am here for you at the end of the day. Like, I am always the sounding board. You can always talk to me. You can always trust me, and I will always be there to support you. And if it's a really hard day, I might help you clean your room because I am that much on your team. Like, if it's a really hard day, we're cleaning the room together. And tomorrow you're going to feel better about our relationship, and you're going to be able to clean the room on your own because you're going to be fulfilled. So that's kind of like, that's my stance on it, is like, I just have to be there for my children, and we can do better as a culture. I think we can be there more for our children. I think we need to be. I think we need to be, if we want this generation to thrive. And those are going to be the children that are taking care of us someday, because life is a cycle. So you got to think about that. You got to think about the kind of relationship that we want to forge with the people that are coming after us. And if we don't care, if we're too busy, like, what is so important about your day that you can't be present for your children for dinner or for breakfast? Like, what is so important? Like, is it the Instagram? Is it the addiction to your phone? Like, what is so important? Like, just be there for your kids, and I think sometimes we've lost sight of that priority. So I guess tying it all back in together is like, for me now, still being a professional athlete, I have my fight coming up December 2nd, and this is where I am really doing my best to find the balance in all of that, because I do believe that sports are inherently selfish. If you are an athlete, you have to be somewhat selfish. Like, there's got to be a level of like, I care about myself and I'm going to put myself first. That is really hard to do as a parent. And it's really hard for me as a mother. I think that it's hard for fathers as well. But obviously, women even have to go through the whole process of like taking time off to be pregnant and birth a baby and then get our car wrecks of a body back in shape to be an athlete again. It's tough. It's really tough. But I do also believe it's important that my children know that by mommy at times prioritizing herself does not mean that they are not important or not valued. It means that it is important to value yourself. And that is the example that I want to set for my kids. So I take them to the gym and it's like, hey, go entertain yourself. That doesn't mean an iPad, because I'm like pretty anti an iPad. It's like, go find something. You're bored? Good. That's great. That's when your brain can be creative. I love hearing that you're bored. Now go find something to entertain yourself, because I've got to train, and I just look at that as an opportunity to show them like, hey, mommy serves herself. Like, and when my kids are making things at home, like, I'll tell them like, make something for yourself, honey. You don't always have to make something for somebody else. Like, do something for you, do something kind for yourself, because those are things that I wish that I knew growing up, because I was still very much I had trouble saying no. I had trouble not being a people pleaser. I would max myself out and then I would still make sure that I was serving the others around me. So it's tricky, but I think my kids are such a beautiful blessing to round me out. They have really motivated me to be the very best version of myself in everything that I do.
Yeah, and I think the fact that you guys are even talking about it, you're way ahead of the game. And it blows me away now that I'm a dad. when I see other parents that don't have that biological instinct that, okay, the whole world is now about their kids. And I hate to say it, but like I see these like dads that have like 9 different kids and they're not present in any of their lives. And I'm like, dude, you are literally missing something at the biological level, because that is so fucked. It blows me away. And then you have like, you know, I don't want to get into like politics, but like organizations that are actually trying to move away from the concept of like a nuclear family. And you're like, what crack are y'all smoking? You know what I mean? Because it's like, it all revolves around that. Right. Yeah. And it's like, if you want a society to progress and people to have good upbringings and be successful and fulfilled, it starts at the family level. So how are we against that? Who is possibly against that? Yeah. But it drives me crazy now that I have perspective. You know, before I still thought it was jacked, but I wasn't a dad yet. But now when you're on the other side of it, you're like, where do these people even come from? That there's not an emphasis on this. But, and I know this is a balance.
Where they come from?
What's that?
They come from parents who did the same thing. It's
I guess.
generational.
Yeah, maybe.
What I mean?
Yeah.
It is. It's like, you know, a lot of times we fault the parent, but we got to think where that parent, like what their exposure it was from their parents was probably workaholism or these things where if the children don't get enough emotional support at home. I mean, this is proven through science. Like, babies need human contact or they will die. It's part of our survival instinct. We need our parents, so we need at least our primary caretakers to be present. And when they're not, children develop maladaptive coping skills to deal with the fact that needs are not being met. And this is where you see it manifest in different ways. But for an example, what you're saying, you know, somebody who has like a lot of kids and they're not present, if they're a workaholic, you know, they're finding a way to still try to find their self-value in this culture that we've said family's not most important. Work is most important. We're not giving you paid paternal leave. You're a dad. Get out of here. You don't get paid leave to be with your family. That's nonsense. And oh, mom, she's getting 6 weeks and that's it. Back to work. Forget breastfeeding. Forget, you know, contact with your baby. Forget that. Like, I mean, it starts from the bottom up and the top down. Like, it's all different ways that I feel like we are misfiring on what we're doing for our children and our families. And, you know, people say, oh, family first, but it's not a culture that leads with family first. It's a culture very much that leads with business first. And somebody brought to my attention the other day, like, I don't want to get too political either, but we're kind of in like a little bit of a silent depression. The average income in the household is, I think it's about $56,000 a year. And the average house is like 8 times that. The average car is like 4 times that. You know, it's like, I might be a little off on the 4 times of the car and that stuff, but like, just depending, you know, like a point in cases, people are not making enough money. So they're working harder than ever, which doesn't leave time for their kids and their family. Makes it really hard. Like, but what if you're a single parent? How are you supposed to do it? You could love your kids to the end of the earth and the moon, but you got to keep a roof over their head. And if you are not able to be present, like, what are we doing? Like, why are we not supporting our families to be at home? And that is a question that's a lot, probably way too much to unpack in this one, but it bothers me. If you couldn't tell.
I'm sure. I mean, like I said, the fact that you guys are even reflecting on it means you're well ahead of the game. And it's something, you know, we're never going to find that perfect balance of being compassionate, but also creating an environment that they're resilient. Right. Yeah. But you know, we're doing our best. And as long as it's always top of mind, like you're going to be just fine. I want to shift gears a little bit, and dive back into, quickly into your rise to the top. And one topic we were talking about before we went on air is, the idea of confidence and the psychology of confidence and how it translates into human performance. And our kind of case studies were way less cool than you, but we were both collegiate athletes, and we both had the same kind of experience where you go from a senior in high school, you're you know, all state, all everything, all, you know, Indiana All-Star, blah, 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 and team MVP, all these things, and you get recruited by all these schools, and they all want you to play there, and you pick one, and you think you're the man, and then you show up for, you know, football, it's preseason camp, and, you know, late July, early August. And all of a sudden you're around all these juniors and seniors that were also all everything in high school, but are 3 years ahead of you and have developed much more physically, because now they're 21 years old and you're 18. And you realize, you go through this like reality crisis of, was I a fluke that whole time? And you lose all your confidence and you have to get that back. So ideally by the time you're sophomore, junior again, you get that swagger back. But there's this there's this reaction, and what that does is not only are those guys actually better than you, but because you lose all the confidence you had when you were a senior in high school, it's like a double whammy because that makes you even worse comparatively. And so I want to talk from a fighter standpoint. Like, I would imagine there is a, confidence is such a huge thing, and I feel like fighters, y'all like have way more swagger than most. Like, no offense, but on average, you guys are absolutely, in my opinion, the cockiest athletes of all time. And I don't even mean that in a bad way, but like these press conferences, it's outrageous. You know what I mean? And it's fun, it's entertaining. But as a fighter, you almost have to have that because you have to manufacture that confidence because what you do is so wild. And you know what I mean? Like, you're getting into a cage with another human to fight. So I have no problems with it. I love the shenanigans before the fight and all that. But as you, when you were at the Ultimate Fighter and then lost to Ronda, and then you won 3 in a row to set up for the title. Maybe you don't even recall this, but like, was there a progression of confidence, and was there a pivotal moment where you finally were like, okay, I have what it takes? And what did that do for you, your human performance in that moment?
I needed it. I needed it to live. To be like a starving lion needing a meal more than ever, like it was the last meal every single time. That's how I looked at every single fight. And when I got the meal, I got the win, I would feel fed, and then I would put my sights on the next meal. I didn't want to get hungry again. I didn't want to be starving again. I didn't want to be bottom of the barrel again. And so I would put that kind of pressure on myself, like it was do or die every single time, because for me it really was, it was my whole world, it was my whole value system was based off of the outcome. So I think, I don't know if that answers the question, but I had my eye on the one prize, the one thing, and that was to become the best in the world, to be 1%,
And so I guess as you got set up for that title shot, because I've always, and more, this is kind of just a fan question, a little less deep, but I always wonder, what is the psychology of, maybe fight week, where you're starting to get the butterflies, and then you guys do weigh-ins, and you're probably at the hotel that night before, you probably can't sleep. Then you're in the back, you're starting to warm up. They're saying, hey, you're on in, maybe 90 minutes. You're taping the freaking hand. You know what I mean? Like, all of that. I would love to know the psychology. And then, you go out to the ring. Obviously, that's probably a huge high. You got your walkout song, you're amped, fans are on their feet, you're fighting for a title. And then all of a sudden they close the door. And then you probably, and again, this is me speculating, never done this. I would imagine for some fighters, there's probably like oh shit, like this is real. That other human across from me is trying to destroy me. And now it's game on, all the music, no more music anymore. It's just me and one other human. Like, I guess, walk us through that psychological progression. I'm sure it's different for every athlete, but I'm sure there's some similarities. And one of the cool things we were talking about is, like, at one point, Mike Tyson had confessed that before every fight, he was actually terrified. And that was such a crazy thing for him to say, because from our perspective, it's like Mike was the baddest dude on the planet, the scariest dude on the planet. And that guy's confessing that he was actually the one terrified, when we just thought his opponent was the one that was terrified, when he was in the same boat, but they're both trying to, not act freaked out. So there's got to be a component of that in combat sports. So I don't know, kind of a loaded question. Go wherever you want with it, but I'm fascinated to know what that is.
Yeah, I think there is a healthy place for fear. I think fear is not something to fear. I think it is your body letting you know that you are ready. Because just because you fear something doesn't mean that you need to shy away from it. It means that you can actually feed off of that fear and embrace it. So there was always an element of fear in every single fight. I think what happened though is when I would experience fear, I would have this sort of self dialogue that would go, oh man, I'm really nervous right now. I'm feeling really anxious. Why is that? I'm like, well, because this is really important to me. And I say, okay, well then don't turn it into something that you hate. Let's go out there and do what we've already put in the work. And the confidence that would come from reminding myself that I don't need to stay in a fearful mindset. Fear is just kind of that bubbling up of like, we're ready to perform. And what you don't want to do is question that. You want to say, that's fine. I am ready. So, okay, like I'm ready. And I remember one specific moment when I was warming up for the fight with Holly Holm. for my world title. And I happened to catch myself in the mirror, which is not something that I can say that I've done every single time, but I was getting ready to walk out and I was passing by a mirror and I stopped and I looked at myself and I said, this is the last time that you will look at yourself and not be a world champion. Like, this is the last moment that you will see yourself without a belt around your waist. Like, you are coming back with that belt. And I just went out there, you know, nerves and all, and everything kind of just turns into this symbiotic relationship of fear and courage where they feed off of each other. And it all just kind of comes together once the cage door closes, that it becomes sort of peaceful at that moment, because there's nothing left to worry about. Now it's just to do. It's all the build up. It's the walkout. It's the warm up where you're not actually getting to get to the result, you know, like to get to the win. That's actually the hardest part. Like for me, once the cage door closes, the announcement starts, it's like, okay, this is where I have been wanting to be. This is where fear and confidence come together to bring the very best version of myself. Yes, I'm a little afraid of like the woman standing across the way, or the potential that I could lose. That's the fear, is like coming up short. But I know I put in the work, and I know I deserve to feel confident in this moment. I know that I am capable, and I know that I can beat this woman standing. She's just a woman. You know, she's just a woman standing across the way from me. She's no superhuman. She's no cyborg. She's just a woman, and I'm going to take her out. And that's really the kind of things that are going through my head before I enter a fight.
Hell yeah.
That's badass.
And fast forward to the 5th round of that fight, you submit Holly Holm.
Was it rear naked choke?
It was, yes.
Oh. What is that feeling? I mean, what you just did an incredible job of describing kind of that lead up, and then you're in the cage, Bruce Buffer screaming at you. But
yeah, quick intervention question, because Tony and I laugh about Bruce Buffer all the time. What effect does that have when he's like fighting and he's pointing at you and his veins are popping up? It's like, that's got to give you a freaking boost when he gives you the intro. Like, I get amped up in the living room. I'm getting goosebumps thinking about it.
He's my boy.
It's so funny, you guys, because I was thinking and dreaming about that moment for so long. So many years of my career, women were not allowed in the UFC, right? So it wasn't even until 2013 that women had their first fight in the UFC. And I remember I'm so looking forward to that moment. And then I get in there and I hear Bruce. I couldn't even hear him. I was just so focused on my opponent. Like I was almost like mad at myself afterwards, because I was already in fight mode and I couldn't appreciate his announcement. Like I couldn't appreciate it like the fans' perspective. I had to go back and watch it because I couldn't even remember him doing that. He was like looking at me and like moving, and I just remember I'm just trying to see around him, and I'm just like trying to stare her down, and I'm already just ready to kill her, and I couldn't even appreciate it. I was like, here he is, like this is the announcement like I've been waiting for, like this moment, and I just was somewhere else. I was already ready to fight. So it's really funny that you say that, but the honest truth for me, at least, is that I barely get a chance once I'm in the octagon. I've realized this about myself, to appreciate the announcer in that moment. It's not till afterwards, like when they announce like a victory or something like that. But I think I'm just once the cage door closes, for me, it's like I'm ready to get in a fist fight. Like, I'm not appreciating anybody. Like, don't fucking compliment me. Like, I'm not here. Like, I don't care what anybody thinks. Like, this is war. I am in a war zone right now, and I don't care what anybody has to say, because I have she's going to try to take my head off, and I'm going to do the reverse. We're already in the cage together, like staring each other down. So like, I feel like he's just in the way at that moment. I wish it wasn't like that, but it is.
That's funny.
So funny.
So yeah, take us. I think we could almost close on this, because this is such a pinnacle moment, I know, for yourself. Take us to that moment of 5th round. You submit Holly Holm. What are those? What feelings bubble up? I mean, that's what, 7 years ago. Walk us through that moment and what that felt like.
Yeah, and even when you took her back, you probably were like, oh shit, like I might be 15 seconds from a title, right? You throw the hooks in and I mean, that's gotta be a wild feeling, particularly like in the 5th round, it's a war, you know what I mean? And all of a sudden, like you have this unique opportunity. So yeah, just kind of adding to yours,
Yeah.
but you know, it's a
I
fascinating thing.
I know that subconsciously I had this thought ingrained, and I couldn't tell you if I consciously processed it in the moment because everything moves so fast, but I knew that it was ingrained in my psyche that my coach told me, who has passed away. So rest in peace, Robert Follis. I will never forget this, but he told me that your pressure is so immense that if you get on top of her, she's going to have two choices. She's either going to stay underneath you and she's going to fold, or she's going to make a mistake getting up. And she chose the latter. She tried to get up because she's a warrior too. Like, hats off to her. Like, she didn't fold. She tried to get up, and sure enough, like, she left her neck up. And I remember wrapping my arm around that and locking in the choke. And at that point, she actually threw both of us into the air. So she launched both of us and we kind of dive rolled, if you will. And I just remember thinking, like, okay, like, that's fine. Like, I'm not letting go. Like, you can take me anywhere. You can drop me on my head on concrete right now, and I'm still going to hang on to this choke. Like, I don't care. I've got it. And it's only a matter of time until she taps. And then I just remember feeling like forever, because the difference between 2 seconds and 6 seconds feels like an eternity. But in practice, people usually tap out at about the 2 second mark, 2, 3 second, because it only takes 6 seconds to go unconscious. So doubling that time when it was moving already so slowly for me, it was just like I was moving through water, and I'm squeezing and I'm thinking, why is she not tapping? I just remember thinking that, like, why is she not tapping? Oh my god, am I squeezing hard enough? Like, I've got to, just everything that I've got, and there's just all this like racing through my head of like, do I need to, like, what, like, why is she not tapping? I couldn't understand it. Well, it's because she spent all 6 seconds fighting it and she went out, and it just, the timing felt immensely longer than what I was used to when I would get people in that, because people don't usually pass out in practice, they usually save their brain cells for the next day. So her going out on her shield is just a testament to what a warrior that she is. But that one had me panicked a little bit because I didn't know how much time was left on the clock. I knew that my worst enemy was the clock at that time. I knew that if I ran out of time, it probably actually, at that point, it would have went to a draw, which means that I would not have obtained the world title. A draw doesn't get you a belt.
So then what are those? She went out, right? She didn't end up tapping. They had to, correct? So
Correct. Yeah.
what did that, what was that feeling like when you realized you just clinched the title?
Well, the referee jumped in and began pulling my arms off, and I was so locked that I was even like trying to let go, but I was like, I don't know, like, I was like locked in position, so I was like trying to let go myself, but I realized at that moment I had won. And then it, not very politely, I kind of just like shoved her off of my leg because we were laying on one side, and she was out, and so I like rolled her right onto her face, and I'm like, how rude, but I was just, at that moment I was so excited I couldn't even understand that she had gone to sleep. I didn't even process that. It wasn't until later, and then I realized, after I'd run around and was screaming and I was so elated, that I was like, oh, she's still unconscious, and then I was kind of like, okay, take a moment, be respectful. But I mean, you're just so pumped in that moment. I mean, for me, that was 10 years of hard work inside the sport, almost 10 years to the day, actually, from my first fight to my world title fight. So it was pretty surreal realizing that it took me 10 years to reach the pinnacle of the sport and to be the 1% and to be the best in the world. But damn, I can't say that it wasn't worth it.
That is so cool. And yeah, it probably all came in perspective in that 10 seconds where you realize what had happened, and it just all culminated in that moment. Well, fast forwarded, I think we're close with one more question to be sensitive to your time. But obviously, you talked about your fight coming up December 2nd. You've made a comeback. You're currently ranked 12th in the world, which is still incredible. Nothing wrong with that. But if you had a crystal ball, what are the next few years look like for Miesha Tate, and like, you know, what's your mindset right now as you look at that fight in December? Yeah, we'll close with that one.
That's a great question. So I have more flexibility in my mind and my life than I ever have before. So I have more than one crystal ball, more than one perspective, because I never want to pigeonhole myself in life ever again, because that is a horrible feeling when you hit rock bottom and you feel like you've got nothing else. You put all the eggs and then some in one basket. So, you know, what I look at for me, what first crystal ball, and I have a mantra that I've been telling myself, and a visualization is a big part of what I do throughout my training camp. I think the mental training is important, but is that I deserve this. I deserve to win. I have put in countless hours. I have made countless sacrifices, and I train hard, and I sacrifice a lot more than most people would even dream or be willing to sacrifice. And so for those reasons, I am justified in saying, I deserve this. I deserve this win, and I want this win. It's actually the first time that I've dropped out of the top 10 rankings since I can remember, since I was in the UFC. So, and part of that is because I dropped to 125 and I haven't fought at 135 in a long time, but it's this win that puts me back in the top 10, which I know that I deserve, and I deserve to be there. And I'm going to go and take what's mine. So that is where my mindset is at. However, I had this debate with myself, and I even put it on my Instagram actually, you know, about like if or when, what is the right terminology for an athlete and a person? Because when you say when I win, people say, oh, that's awesome, she's confident. But I also feel like it can make you comfortable because you just assume that's the way it's going to go. I also like if, because first of all, it's not as finite. It means I've got to work for it, because nothing is for sure, right? So if I win, right, which I deserve to win. And if I win, I'm going on a title run, like I'm going for gold. And if I don't, then I'm going to take a whole different path. Like I'm going to marry my fiance. I want to have another kid. I want to continue to raise my beautiful children. I'm going to open a wellness center. I'm going to continue public speaking. I'm going to continue to use the voice and platform that I've built with my blood, sweat, and tears to talk to people about bettering their life and hopefully the future generation's life. And I'm just going to continue to lead a charge, because I know that there is so much more for me to give than just physically inside of an octagon. You know, I will no longer be locked in there. I will be free to roam the world and hopefully make an impact, because I think that I was built for impact. I think that I was built to be impactful. And those are the things that I believe. So I'm working hard. I deserve this. And if I win, I'm going on that title run.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah. Well, we're pumped. You said December 2nd, right? Where's that fight going to be?
It's to be determined. So I am not sure yet.
Okay.
But yeah, but it'll be on ESPN. So wherever you are, you can watch it. ESPN Plus.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us. I know you're a very busy woman and also a busy mom. And hopefully for the listeners, you know, for me, I think the biggest theme to extract from that honestly was a little bit unplanned, is just that, you know, while a relentless pursuit in any direction is to be commended, make sure that you're staying balanced in watering other aspects of your life, because eventually the gig will be up, and the chickens are going to come home to roost if you don't do a balanced approach. And it sounds like maybe the three of us have all experienced that, doing it the wrong way. I know I have, and it's hard to balance both. So I think it's something you really got to give a lot of thought to, but that was the most thought-provoking thing for me, and I think hopefully for the listeners, maybe you're scratching your head a little bit, wondering if maybe you're taking that approach. But thank you so much, and I'll give it to you guys for closing thoughts.
Yeah, I think I love that we covered kind of it's interesting, the high of you describing the title fight with Holly and the elation that you felt after. But then if you've listened to the whole podcast, obviously you know the context that 5 months or 6 months or something after that is when you're describing basically you hitting rock bottom. And I say that because to me, that's life. And like that, the people that I look up to, the people that I respect most, the people that I consider wisdom carriers are people that have been through those moments of like extreme success, extreme, like almost put on a pedestal, but then have also had their legs chopped out from underneath them, and then they still choose to build themselves back up to somebody that like is offering something to the world. So as Bear said, we kind of went off the rails a little bit, but I love that because I think it shows you as somebody who's such a high performer that, yeah, this wasn't fucking roses along this whole path. And that like now to see you very clearly kind of know that while still expressing your art is just very cool. And I think we need more of that. So thanks for sharing your story. I like I said, I love seeing the highs and lows of that.
Thank you guys. And I really appreciate the opportunity to go off the rails and get off on tangents and talk about everything from sport to mindset to parenting, because these are the things that encompass who I am as a being and the message that I want to continue to put out. And I think my closing thoughts would be, I always like to talk about the metaphorical home, the metaphorical house that we build. And I think where people sometimes get afraid to start is because they think that if this house that they've built were to be disintegrated, if it were burnt to burn to the ground, that they wouldn't know how to build it again. But you never learn how to build it in the first place unless you're willing to take the risk of it burning down, right? So you've got to build it, and every single time that it gets knocked down, you're going to actually build a better home than you did before, right? It's like the first time you buy a home or you rent an apartment, right? And then you buy a home and it's your first home and you're like, God, if I could do things different, if I could build my own home, right? It would be, I would change this and I would do, and every time that you get knocked down, every time that metaphorical home burns to the ground, it is nothing but an opportunity to build a better living space. And that's the place that you reside. So never fear getting started and never fear letting that house burn to the ground. You know, like I would celebrate it and I would say, let it burn down, because you've got the skills, you've got the tools to build it again.
Love it.
Hell yeah. Very well put. Thank you again. We will be tuning in December. Good luck. I'm hoping maybe rear naked choke in the first round after a sweet Bruce Buffer intro. Hopefully this time you'll actually watch when he's introing you, but if not, all good. But if there's anything we can do on our end, don't ever hesitate to reach out. We're here, and yeah, we're stoked. Thank you so much.
I appreciate it. Thank you guys.